Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to speak to you today. How are you?
Great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Maybe we can kick off with a brief introduction to this amazing film, Time Addicts. Quite a difficult one, maybe to capture in a few words, but what can people expect when they watch it?
Yeah, I think I guess the main thing is that people should just expect something completely unique. It was really a experimentation in genre, and so I guess just don't go in with any expectations. Just go and check it out.
And tell us a bit about the backstory, the genesis of it. What gave you the initial idea for the story, and why did you want to make the film?
Yeah, so I'd made a short film that was basically around the same characters and similar parts of the story. Like a few years ago, we shot that in 2017, finished it in 2018. I had the idea for a few years before that, and the short film seemed to be really resonating. So I hadn't planned to make a feature of this, but at the time, I was like, "Look, this seems to be." It seems to be received in the way that it was intended, and people seem to be liking it. So I was like, "Oh, maybe this makes a great proof of concept for the feature." And so, it really helped with getting everything in place, like the financing and other shareholders in place just to try to make that work. Yeah, the initial idea for the short film, like there was a lot of inspirations, but I think one of the main ones was the book A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick. That was always one of my favorite books. I think it's like hilarious and heartbreaking and yeah, all set in a sci-fi world. So I was like, oh, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can sort of like um, put these sort of characters in this circumstance that's a little bit crazy for them. And then the time travel kind of came into that when I sort of started playing around with the idea of like drug abuse or drug abuse and sort of how that affects your past, your future, and then obviously those around you and those around you, which um, happen to be family.
Yeah, I was gonna be my next question of kind of because it is kind of bringing together lots of different genres, kind of the sci-fi elements, and then this idea of kind of going on a drug trip. There's lots of sort of other films that sort of dabble in that, but then also the tone is sort of kind of veering all the time between this dark humor, but then you're actually really absorbed into these characters' lives and their vulnerability, and they're going back into their past and things. So it's not strictly sort of one or the other. So did you have any other reference points, maybe in terms of other films, when you were
Yeah,
making?
yeah. So a big one that was a reference from like day one was Memories of Murder, the Korean film, Bong Joon-ho's film. I just was always really impressed with how they managed the comedy in that. Like obviously such a serious subject matter about Korea's first serial killer, and they balance it with like I find it such a funny film, and like there's a couple of little nods to that film in ours. So that was a big influence. And then, like I think a lot of, probably a lot of 90s stuff that I grew up with. Like I watched a lot of Terry Gilliam films when I was young, like 12 Monkeys is like a little bit of an influence as well.
Yeah, I can totally see all those things as you're saying it. And maybe that's why it also somehow feels a bit retro. I don't know
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
you think like modern day sci-fi, usually it's taking us, a lot of really sort of special effects and everything's very kind of pristine, maybe, whereas this feels quite gritty and real and, is kind of messing with your head all the time. So is that something you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I also, as well as loving all those sort of sci-fi films, I also just really love films like, Train Spotting and Kids and This Is England. And I think what those films get so right and what they achieve and how they achieve that kind of grittiness is the specificity of place and the location. And, like we kind of, yeah, not even really set out to like it's just a very Melbourne film. Like I'm not sure if you've been to the Melbourne, but it feels very Melbourne. It's like the way people dress here, the way they talk, and like I think anyone could watch it that was from here and be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Um, so yeah, like it was very intentional. Like again, it's like a lot of those kind of like 90s films and indie films which yeah, kind of inspired it. Like, so yeah, and also like it really inspired the look as well. So like, it shouldn't look or feel too sci-fi-ish. Like it still feels quite gritty, even in like the 90s, which obviously the house is a lot more pristine than in later eras. Like it still feels like there's cigarette smoke in that house and there's like dirty light coming in from outside. So.
And what were some of the practicalities of pulling that off? I mean, just even the house itself, and it, goes from, feeling like a normal house to like this labyrinth, and how, like subtle changes about it. How did you kind of pull that off? And I guess, you're not working with a huge budget, so how to make that feel very real.
So much of it is a testament to our art department and just stretching the budget and making it work like that. I never said, oh, I think I think this would be great. Like, let's try do this. And they'd be like, oh no, like they'll just get it done. Like that house, it was an actual house. Like we shot on location and it took a long time to find, and it was a knockdown. So we had the permission to kind of do what we want, which was great. But we got in there and every wall was white. So they had to dress it from the toes up, like it was, massive job, and more than happy to remind me that like I made them renovate a house 4 times in a month. So yeah, it was a lot of work there, and then there was a lot of work in terms of, I guess, just the pre-production and how we wanted to shoot it and how we were going to make the errors look different, and like just try to assist the audience a little bit in terms of like where we are and what we're doing. And yeah, obviously the sort of camera and lighting team had so much to do with that as well, and just making it feel like a very tangible place.
And your incredible cast, kind of the 4 people that come up and the changing relationship between them, and how they have to go on this kind of roller coaster of emotions. And as we were saying earlier, kind of be able to flip between these moments of like kind of cutting humor with the dialogue, but then also moments of vulnerability. So how did you choose them and how did you work with them?
So like I think casting was probably the most stressful part of making the whole film. Like we only just got Freya, who's the lead, she plays Denise. Like we only just cast her 2 weeks before we started pre-production, so it was quite stressful. We spent a long time looking for Johnny because we were like, oh, we need to get him right, otherwise the film could be a bit of a joke in a bad way. And so we were really lucky to find Charles, and then like it was more just around who gelled with Charles. Like we did some tests, and the thing that really stood out with Freya was that she didn't buy into all the Johnny bullshit. She was always sort of like happy to just sort of shut him down, and like you could tell that there were things going on with her that she wasn't sharing with him. So yeah, it just felt like, and they just connected straight away. Like it just all felt like it worked straight away. I think in regards to like, the jumping back and forth and jumping around in the genre stuff, it actually didn't really come up too much. Like we pretty much, with every head of department, like in the crew and with the cast, I'd said to them early on, let's just treat this film like a drama. Let's forget that like there's jokes in there, and let's forget that there's anything funny, and just like let's just go into it fully serious. Let's make this as if it's like the most serious drama that we could make. And we kind of almost forgot that it was a dark comedy, and now that it's out there and audiences watching it and they're laughing a lot, it's awesome, because we kind of just, I guess, tried to make it feel as real as possible, just so that all that stuff sort of connected together.
And in the making of it, in that sense, was there a scene that was particularly hard to pull off, and on the flip side, one that a real highlight?
I think the hardest scene to pull off technically was Denise versus Denise in the baby's room, like where she's talking to herself. Like we filmed both those scenes, both sides of those scenes on 2 days, and it was a small room. It was freezing cold. Everyone was sick. You're kind of trying to edit the film in your head as you go, but you've got a double in place of her and sometimes no one there. And so like it was just, you're sort of shooting every shot twice, because we didn't want to just shoot it over the shoulder or singles. Like we wanted to really sell it and make it feel like it was a part of the rest of the film, and it was adhering to the I guess the cinematic rules we'd made for the rest of the film. So that was pretty nightmare day. Like that was really tough. I was happy to get through that one. Another thing that was really tough was just kind of working out the like that kind of like the emotional connection towards the end of the film, and in the bathroom with Denise and Johnny before she sort of says goodbye to him, or before she's trying to usher him away. That was really difficult at script stage to figure that out, but I felt like that was one of the things that really connected on set. We didn't have a lot of time to shoot that. I would have loved to have like a little bit more coverage, but like I just like really proud of that scene, and was so blown away with like what Charles and Freya did in that scene too, and Josh behind the door as well.
And what ultimately do you hope people take away from watching the film? And it does kind of take you on this journey, but you know, there's a lot to pull out there in terms of, you know, I mean, thinking about people who live in that place and do have addictions, and confronting your past and what that all might mean. What people can take away in terms of the messages in that sense.
Yeah, in terms of the messaging, I guess it is kind of like a little bit of a story of redemption and responsibility. You know, like I think for me, and this is not the case for obviously everyone with like, you know, any sort of drug issues. Like I think in Johnny and Denise's case, their drug use is so symptomatic of other things that are going wrong, or other things that are not happening for them, or like other things that they're not confronting in their life. So, you know, like I hope that stuff comes through. I kind of feel like the most sort of important part of the film is, and you know, because they're so codependent as well, you know, at the start of the film, like they're never on the same page. That one's always walking ahead or one's always walking behind, but they are always have to be in the sort of vicinity of each other. And towards the end of the film, like I guess they kind of learn that they don't need to have this codependence, just like they don't need to have their codependence with you know, with drugs either. But yeah, I think it's mostly just about that journey, that relationship, and the thing I sort of hope people would take away would be like just you know, sort of feeling like that relationship between them was real, and they sort of connect and feel some like emotion towards the end there, where you know they've got to say goodbye, and then you know obviously the final kind of scenes where we sort of wrap it all up.
And you're saying there about, you know, the being surprised, you know, perhaps audiences' reactions. How have you found the response, and do you feel like it's been any different at home, you know, in Melbourne than abroad, because maybe there's like resonance there?
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's we haven't had like that many people see it yet. You know, like the response, obviously, of people that have seen it in the UK has been amazing. Like I think we were never, I guess, worried about the UK. Like I feel like this kind of fits in there, and it's you know, like you guys are pretty happy to like mix up genres and like a lot of different sci-fi stuff, and kind of like you know, I'm originally from New Zealand, and I think like we kind of have like a similar sort of dark sense of humor too, and I think that sort of like is what comes through in Time Addicts. In Australia, I think it'll be interesting to see. Like so far, it's been amazing. Like people have really been kind of taking away what we intended, and I think we don't see too many films like this here. So yeah, it'll be really kind of interesting to see how it goes. I feel like the industry here is maybe a little bit more conservative than it is overseas. So this is probably not the film for everyone, but I think that it sort of shows characters that everyone in Australia would know, or would know sort of versions of, and I think that's what people are connecting with most. The fact that like they're like, oh yeah, this is so funny because I've heard these conversations before.
And can you quickly tell us what you might be working on next? Have you already got an idea percolating?
Yeah, so I'm working on a film which is sort of like a horror thriller, which has a little bit of kind of Time Addicts tone to it, but it's still early stages. But yeah, hopefully we can get that on its feet and maybe shoot it next year.
Amazing. And in terms of your sort of future goals, are there any other genres you've not tried yet you'd love to, you know, dabble in, or an actor you'd like to work with in particular?
I think that like I guess like I'm kind of happy to like keep on the path I'm on. Like I you know, like I think that everything I do will probably have like a little touch or element of sci-fi to it, and I think I kind of like the more pared back sci-fi stuff. Like obviously yeah, a lot of Alex Garland stuff and you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that yeah, there's not really any sort of genres where I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do that. But I think that whatever sort of specified by the concept, you know, or whatever that sort of story direction takes me, like I'd be happy to go into. In terms of actors, yeah, I don't know. I think there's some amazing actors like in the UK. I mean, there always is, but like at the moment, like I think like some people like, you know, Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh, like I think like they're pretty incredible, like what they're doing. Like I never watch anything with them, and I'm like, yeah, like this is yeah, not real. Like there's always so many dimensions to it. Yeah, having the opportunity to work with someone like that would be great.
Jessie Buckley, I saw her the other day. She's another.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and I can't wait for everyone else to have the chance to see Time Addicts. Thanks a lot.